Rastafari consciousness. A. The royal challenge: organize and centralize. Rastafari, as an inborn conception, observes no authority excepting His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I H.I.M. H.I.M. has commanded: organize and centralize. This implies an organized collective with central direction. Centralized direction proceeds from a unified program, the latter being preceded by a concord of ideas. The royal challenge devolves, therefore, into the development of such a concord of ideas to guide the development of a unified program of Rastafari collective action. This concord of ideas is the first step, yet to be attained, on the way to an organized collective practice as commanded by H.I.M. B. The inner eye. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. For only you can free your mind. The attempted liberation of a mind by a second party simultaneously is the attempted subjugation of that mind to the mind of the second party. This is self-evident. In Rasta there is no special teacher, each one teach one, Rasta says. Even if a thought seed was presented to Rasta, it has to give rise to an inborn concept through a process of personalization that alters, refines, and augments the received thought seed in such a way that it becomes ineluctably an original concept. Even an alteration of the terminology may accompany and complete this process. Thus there occurs a true conception, with all the originality implied, and imbued with conviction. Simultaneously with the emergence of the inborn concept, there occurs the liberation of self-enlightenment and relief from the burdens of stubborn confusion and persistent irritical suffering. Thus, regardless of all previous understanding, at the moment of the inborn conception everything appears brand new, things fall into place with a magical facility. Even amorphous confusion becomes a simplified pattern. Things appear simple, necessary, at least to one another, and tractable, rather than complicated, superfluous, yet unavoidable. Only then does Rasta sight the concept with the inner eye. C. The futility of ideology. How long shall they kill our prophets? While we stand aside and look. Some say it's just a part of it. We got to fulfill the book. This inactivity in the face of the murders of our leaders, the visionary leaders of a subjugated people of necessity or prophets, results from our impotence due to mental slavery. Our mental slavery results from, and manifests itself as, the acceptance of the explanations given in such sayings and writings. Acceptance, as a fundamental truth, of the ideas expressed in such sayings and writings, is clearly a tragic fatalism that engenders futile martyrdom. In general, the understanding that rests upon other ideas, for the understanding exists as ideas, is the ideological consciousness. This deriving of ideas ultimately from ideas is the ideological process. A person of an ideological consciousness is an ideologist. A body of thought that is derived or presented ideologically is an ideology. Ideologies are usually associated with distinct communities of like-minded ideologists who identify with the founders of various ideologies. For the members of each ideological community, all relevant queries are settled when solutions are derived from ideologically fundamental ideas called principles. So you think you found a solution. But it's just another illusion. Such principles appear as deductive starting points for the ideological followers. Yet these principles are most often the conclusions of the founders of the ideologies. That is, principles are conclusions, endpoints, of the investigations, ruminations of the founders of the ideologies, but are starting points for the follower ideologists. This transformation of endpoints into starting points is not the only unconscious inversion of the ideologists. The founder of an ideology, who knows that the principles she established are conclusions of sometimes arduous investigations, is often, therefore, not an ideologist. Yet the followers perceive the founder to be the greatest ideologist. A third inversion of the ideologists is to regard the real world as merely the realm of exemplars of ideologies, rather than as the test bed, much less the source, of ideas. The existence of a community of ideologists and the emergence of professional ideologists, academicians, preachers, politicians, authors, artists, men and women of letters, and so on, give rise to such a discussion that fosters an impulse to ideological self-consistency. Thus the ideology becomes theoretical. In the effort to defend ideology and fellow ideologists against contradictions arising with respect to reality, ideologists often are forced to ideologically bend reality to ideologically conservative objectives. In so doing, they may become dishonest or ever more blinkered and narrow in their views and utility. In any case, mental emancipation is not available to the ideologist, since by definition an ideologist is comfortably, albeit unknowingly, mentally enslaved to the founders and teachers of the ideology. Ultimately, it is the founder who informs the follower ideologist of the latter's path to mental liberation. That is, a follower ideologist finds his mental liberation through mental slavery. Henceforth, her delight is to prove by quotation. Any reference to reality is merely to illustrate the concretization of the principle, never its derivation. The various classes of ideologies include religious, political, economic, social, and cultural ideologies. All ideologies are based on principles as expressed in sayings and writings and have at least one founder or revealer. Areas of knowledge and practice that depend on verification in material reality are less susceptible to ideological recasting. Yet ideologically cultured intellects nevertheless will attempt to recast even the natural sciences and the technologies into ideological forms. Thus recast these areas of knowledge present unnecessary difficulties to the lay person and the student. D. Rasta's anti-ideological stance. Rasta always bun religion, bun books generally, bun the Bible likewise, bun book learning, bun hearsay, bun politics, bun ideological authorities and practitioners, preachers and politicians. All in all, they seek as one to fight against the Rasta man. So they build a world of great confusion to force on us the devil's illusion. We sick and tired of your ism, skezim game. About die and go to heaven in a Jesus name. We know and we understand that Almighty God is the living man. They say that we are free, only to be chained in poverty. I say it's illiteracy. It's only a machine to make money. In short, Rasta has always been and remains militantly anti-ideological. Rejecting ideological authority and always striving for the inborn conception, Rastas achieve a non-ideological conception. No time to be deceived. Brothers, we must know and not believe. E. Rastafari epistemology. Conscious practice is practice led by thinking. Where do thoughts come from? Don't forget your history. Know your destiny. In the abundance of water, the fool goes thirsty. History is the abundant source of Rastafari ideas. Rastafari has an historical epistemology. In fact, this search of history in order to understand saves Rasta from the world of confusion and exposes the devil's illusion. History is the waters that quench Rasta's thirst for redemptive knowledge. So that I say, have no fear, have no sorrow. History is often considered within the divisions of human history and natural history. However, the devastation wrought by Babylon on nature and the reciprocal threat to human existence arising from a devastated nature enforce a belated recognition of the unity of both divisions in a single historical process, the world. History, of course, is not just about the past, there is also current history. But this division is merely convenient. There is a single history of a unitary world. History, as such, then contains all that can be known. F. Understanding, reasoning, and overstanding. It is through reasoning that Rasta moves from understanding to overstanding. It is from a standpoint of overstanding that Rasta conceptually rejects, affirms, and innovates. The ideas formed through knowledge and understanding becomes transformed into conceptions of the overstanding through the critical fire of reasoning. F1. The faculties of the understanding. The faculties of the understanding are the following 7: observation and experiment, induction and deduction, analysis and synthesis, and comparison. Through the application of these faculties we gain knowledge and an understanding of the real world. All activities of positive science that discovers and verifies the facts of science are also applications of the faculties of the understanding. So-called theoretical science is often speculation and not science, and too often tainted with ideology. All these faculties of the understanding are possessed by humans and by the higher animals in common, although to different degrees of development. Knowledge and understanding are not enough. There are many erudite fools. Being born in Babylon, Rasta is bombarded with ideologies, isms, and ideologically supported or caused divisions between people, schisms. Ideologies present ready-made ideological explanations for uncritical acceptance by the understanding. In fact, many ideologies are learnt at an early stage of life, in schools, including Sunday school, in additional forms of socialization, and in the media. The ideological consciousness thus become the dominant type of consciousness in Babylon, so early acquired that it appears reflexive, natural. But you could fool some people sometime. But you can't fool all the people all the time. F2. Reasoning, the blazing fire. No matter what game they play, we have something they can never take away. And it's the fire that's burning down everything. This is the fire of criticism that burns down all ideologies, all the confusion and illusions, all the isms, in short it burns down all historically unfounded ideas. This crucible of criticism, that they can never take away, is the fire of purification in which all received ideas must be immersed so that Rasta can reject beliefs and give birth to the inborn conception based upon the knowledge of history. Classically, when Rasta bun God, the Bible, politics, religion, Rasta is subjecting these concepts to the fire of criticism. This explains, for example, the evident contradiction that relatively few Christians study the Bible as much as the Rasas that bun it. However, this study of the Bible by Rasta is in order to subject it to the fiery criticism through which liberating knowledge is liberated. Thus Rasas, in the middle of a rabidly enforced book ban, that actually started in 1517 and ended in 1972, were still able to achieve an amazing and much recognized mental and thus cultural liberation. Hence the significant creativity infused by Rasta into Babylon. This critical re-examination of received concepts must be applied to all things in order to mentally tear down the world of confusion. Now the fire is burning out of control. Destroying and melting dear gold. Destroying and wasting dear souls. This blazing fire of purifying criticism, based on a firm grasp of reality, buttressed on the foundation of historical knowledge past and current, is that something they can never take away. F3. The modes of reasoning. Rastafari emphasizes the importance of the set of activities referred to as reasoning. Reasoning is the necessary form of rational criticism. Reasoning is the examination of concepts. To be subject to examination, concepts need to be developed into abstract forms, words. As words, concepts gain the necessary abstraction to enable a necessarily abstract mental examination. Without being developed as words, concepts remain locked into the complex of the whole world conception that informs the unreflective consciousness. Animals cannot reason due to the lack of development of a language. Reasoning may involve the single individual or may occur as a dialogue in a group. Rasta says, I reason in I higher ites, and come mek I reason. There are three modes of reasoning. Reasoning, the examination of concepts, may proceed historically, dialectically, or by means of the dialectical dialogue. The historical examination of the concept follows the concept in its development over time. Essentially, the reasoning examines the real-world content of the concept. As the world changes, the content of the concept changes in its real-world application. Its meaning becomes altered usually by adding more content while retaining the previous content. The dialectical examination of the concept follows its development from its simplest, most common meaning, through its more developed stages with greater or more specialized concept content, more substantial meanings, and to its limits, as expressed in its reaffirmation with conviction, or in a need for a new concept, or even a new conception. Dialectics place great emphasis on the line of development of the concept, as the essence of the concept is thereby revealed. The dialectical dialogue resumes the dialectical examination by means of a series of linked queries posed to the defender of the concept. The links between consecutive queries are the answers given by the defender. The skilled questioner follows such a trail of queries that forces the presenter to such a position that contradicts an earlier proposition. Thereby, the weakness, the inner contradictoriness, and the potential self-destruction of the concept are revealed. If such a contradiction does not emerge, then the presenter is deemed to have defended the proposed concept. This is the fire of purification that Rasta collectively puts on concepts in groundations amongst themselves. Thus the collective fire of purification results in humility of irits, a thirst for knowledge, and the elevation of gregariousness as these virtues are required and developed as the fire produces an overstanding of reality. F4. Overstanding. Knowledge leads to understanding. Reasoning leads to overstanding. Understanding is based on perception. Overstanding is based on inborn concepts. Overstanding is comprehension transformed by critical conceptualization. Even the sound of the word has to be in a higher conformity to the concept it bears for the latter to be adequately expressed. Thus Rasta emphasizes not just the word, but more completely, Rasta expresses the word sound. Thus, overstanding transforms the received word into the inborn word sound through the baptismal purifying fire. It is through the limitations of received languages and dialects recognized for overstanding that Rasta has had, and continues, to create brand new, yet ancient concepts. That overstanding is not common outside of Rasta is attested to by the late great professor of history Walter Rodney, who said, "In fact, as I speak here I would like to feel perhaps that what I am saying in one form or another will reach the brothers and therefore it is a message both to you and them. And above all I would like to indicate my own gratification for that experience which I shared with them. Because I learned. I got knowledge from them, real knowledge. You have to speak to Jamaican Rasta, and you have to listen to him, listen very carefully and then you will hear him tell you about the word. And when you listen to him, and you go back and read about Nomo, an African concept for word, and you say, goodness the Rastas know this, they knew this before Jan Heinz Jan. You have to listen to them and you hear them talk about cosmic power and it rings a bell. I say, but I have read this somewhere, this is Africa. You have to listen to dear drums to get the message of the cosmic power. And when you get that, no, you get humility, because look who you are learning from. The system says they have nothing, they are the illiterates, they are the dark people of Jamaica. Our conception of the whole world is that white is good and black is bad, so when you are talking about the man is dark, you mean he is stupid. He has a dark mind. So that is what the system says. But you learn humility after you get into contact with these brothers. And it is really great. I am giving here now a personal reaction. I find my colleagues, my so-called peers, white people, black bourgeoisie all frustrate me and I get annoyed. I find it difficult to conduct a discussion. I am more likely than not to tell them a few bad words after a while. And by and large I do not think it is good for the personality, probably makes you contemptuous, haughty and so on, that you have seen and they have not. But with the black brothers you learn humility because they are teaching you. And you get confidence, you get a confidence that comes from an awareness that our people are beautiful. Beauty is in the very existence of black people. Now we have gone through a historical experience through which by all accounts we should have been wiped out. We have been subjected to genocidal practices. Millions raped from the West African continent, a system of slavery in the West Indies that was designed to kill people. The documents are there. White slave masters used to conduct a discussion. They said, look, we have some blacks, what to do with them? Is it better to let him grow old and work for us for an extended period of time, or should we work him for a specified period of time, work him so hard and let him die, and buy a fresh slave? And the consensus of opinion was this: take a prime African black, work him to death in 5 years, and you make a profit. So the system aimed at killing us out. Now not only have we survived as a people but the black brothers in Kingston, Jamaica in particular, these are brothers who, up to now, are every day performing a miracle. It is a miracle how these fellows live. They live and they are physically fit, they have a vitality of mind, they have a tremendous sense of humor, they have depth. How do they do that in the midst of the existing conditions? And they create, they are always saying things. You know that some of the best painters and writers are coming out of the Rastafari environment. F5. Judgment. Where judgment is not simply comparison, it is reasoning, and properly performed it is an exercise of criticism. Judgment is the emplacement of a concept in a conceptual framework. This framework may be a conceptual continuum or a code. The aim of the exercise is to decide the proper placement and to draw the consequential conclusions from the relationship of the concept to the conceptual framework as examined in reasoning. In a proper judgment, both the concept and the framework should be critically examined so as to ensure that both are adequately understood and related. G. Consciousness and practice. Our consciousness of the world determines our approach to our practice. An important and often overlooked aspect of the real world is our own practice. Thus consciousness determines our practice, as it itself is determined, in part, by our practice. Truth is the coincidence of ideas and reality as revealed through, and proven by practice. A most important aspect of our consciousness wisdom is but our past practice transformed into general guidelines visible to the inner eye, lessons, for our current and future practice. Remember. Don't forget your history. Know your destiny. History, through wisdom, is the science of the future. It provides the substance for the determination, through conscious practice, of our future, our destiny. H. Towards Rasta destiny. The royal reward for the achievement of the royal challenge to organize and centralize is a destiny in Ethiopia. In addition to the royal reward, there are other benefits accruing to Rasta through the execution of the royal challenge. Collective focus on collectively decided tasks collectively executed and monitored will produce significant enhancement of the Rasta's personal development and social interaction, despite geographical separation. The royal challenge has proven to be one of significant difficulty. Its fulfillment has evaded INI for decades, despite several serious efforts, some of which are still current. In short, organizing and centralizing Rasta on the required and desired scale is a significant problem. In fact, some organizations that have been formed specifically to accomplish the royal challenge have turned out to be merely other divisions of Rasta. Of great note are the great efforts and significant successes of certain Rasta houses in facilitating the return of Rastas to Ethiopia. Yet even these successes pale in the face of the magnitude of the scale required by the royal challenge. The following are relevant to a renewed approach to the royal challenge. 1. Rastafari, the inborn concept, manifests as races who generally observe no authority except H.I.M. His Imperial Majesty is the power of authority. 2. Organize has most usually been taken to mean to form an organization. This means having an executive, funding, and a program. Such an organization then has to make itself available to, or actively recruit Rasas to become members. This generally does not happen, at least not adequately. The particular reasons for this continuing failure are varied, but generally these failures result from a lack of concord on representation and/or program, and lack of adequate outreach. 3. The common feature of these past and current organizations addressing the royal challenge is this top-down approach. This approach involves forming an organization of like-minded individuals. Once formed, the organization then proclaims its principles and program and calls for adherence and support. This approach to organizing has, so far, been inadequate to the royal challenge. This remains so despite strenuous and self-sacrificing efforts by many individuals. 4. There is an alternative approach to organizing. In this approach, the royal challenge is first raised as a great discussion involving as wide a participation of Rasas as possible. An effort to bring these various discussions to all the Rasas will initiate a centralizing of discourse. The discussion then becomes collective. 5. The virtue of this bottom-up approach is that individuals are engaged before the collective program is crystallized. The program that results from such a collective discussion will then be owned by a wide collective of Rasas. In this sense, the collectively decided program will be a collectively inborn conception. 6. The development of the collective discussion will eventually enmesh the Rasta individuals and organizations in a single network of information and discursive interaction. Such a network is already a nascent, really widespread collective organization. 7. This information network, apart from directly discussing the execution of the royal challenge, would also carry information on the activities, events, and views of the Rasta individuals and organizations. In this way, the documentation of the current history of Rasta would have commenced collectively for the first time. The sharing of the information on the current history of Rasta would make Rasta individuals conscious of the real collective current history of Rastafari. This consciousness of the reality of Rasta is necessary to the evaluation of Rasta's conditions, movements, requirements, potentialities, and desires. From this point of view, it becomes clear that to attempt to meet the royal challenge without such a consciousness of the reality of Rasta and without the involvement of the Rasas from the very start would be to invite the failures, partial successes and the frustrations so far manifested and felt. 8. The Rastafari Information Network (RIN) would encompass and support all Rastafari discussions, publications, and research. With the subsequent consciousness of Rasta of the current state of such activities, further needs and opportunities will be recognized. In this way, and therefore in ways yet to be made manifest, the royal challenge will be taken up. The races, through their early engagement and participation, will be conscious of their collective ownership of the process and the responsibility of its results. The approach to the royal challenge will be collectively decided, monitored, and adjusted as required, and so the collective genius of the races will be focused on our great challenge. 9. The RIN promotes and facilitates the distribution of knowledge, particularly of the affairs and activities of, and topics of interest to, Rasta. This facilitates improved understanding. Similarly, the RIN facilitates and promotes reasoning, the critical examination of relevant concepts and ideas, by Rasta. No doubt such reasoning will lead to a greater overstanding of the collective and personal tasks required to successfully accomplish the royal challenge of H.I.M. 10. Such a widespread and meaningful reasoning facilitated by the RIN will require and engender the virtues of clear thinking, good general knowledge, humility, and affability. The groundation will thus be recreated on a much greater scale and unity than ever before. Credits. 1. Bob Marley, Redemption Song. Uprising Album, 1980. 2. Bob Marley, So Much Trouble in the World. Survival Album, 1979. 3. Bob Marley, Ride Natty Ride. Survival Album, 1979. 4. Bob Marley, Get Up Stand Up. Rebel Music Album, 1979. 5. Bob Marley, Rat Race. Rebel Music Album, 1979. 6. Walter Rodney, The Groundings with My Brothers, October 18, 1968, Montreal. 7. Bob Marley, Black Man Redemption. Confrontation Album, 1979. Rastafari Consciousness. A. The Royal Challenge, Organize and Centralize. Rastafari, as an inborn conception, observes no authority excepting His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I H.I.M. H.I.M. has commanded, organize and centralize.